All right. So today we're looking at the skeletal system. We're going to be talking a little bit about bones, and we're going to be mainly talking a lot about joints. Obviously we got to understand like bones because those are these big long levers that give us a framework, and they give our muscular system, sort of something to manipulate. But one of the biggest things that we talk about is like movement, right? Like we're in the industry of moving, right? And so when we're talking about like the skeletal system, one of our primary focuses is understanding how those joints are actually sort of like being manipulated and moving around and stuff. So looking at the skeletal system, so our purpose of today's lesson to give you guys a pretty deep understanding of the fundamental concepts of the skeletal system in particular, as it's part of the kinetic chain. So we'll talk a little bit about how that system sort of adapts and responds to stress today. So we'll give it a definition at the top. I love to start my notes with definitions. I just realized I need to zoom in. There we go. So your skeletal system is your body's framework, right? It's going to be comprised of all of your bones and all of your joints, right? So that is giving it's not just like a lot of times when you think of the skeletal system, we think of the stuff that we can kind of see, right? We think of like, this like framework here, all these big, hard, calcified bones. And we often think of it as like dead tissue. We think of like it's this kind of, hard mineralized tissue that kind of lives in our body, but it's very much that your bones are, very much living when they are inside your body. When you see a cartoon or something and they're going through the desert, they always draw like this kind of stuff in cartoons to represent that like there's no water and stuff. What you're seeing sort of left behind is the calcified pieces of what used to be living tissue. The calcium's left behind, but the live stuff is all gone. So it kind of looks like there's this, and like that's sort of what we picture inside of our bodies, but it's actually a little bit different. Your skeletal system has like a lot of collagen in it, which is similar to the stuff that's found in your skin. There's a lot of like very much like living structures in there. So when we're talking about the skeletal system, we're talking about the bones, but we are also talking about your joints. Like we're talking about how the bones come together. Some of them come together, like a ball and socket joint, right? Where it'll have sort of a cavity and then little ball and socket joint kind of sits within that to kind of rotate. Other ones, they kind of fit together and hinge together kind of like this, so that they can make these kind of motions here or sliding actions here. There's a lot of different ways that our bones come together in our joints. And so we're definitely going to spend a lot of time sort of understanding those. And then we've got to have a way for like that hard tissue to stay connected together. We got to talk about the structures found inside those joints, which are things like ligaments and cartilage and any of the special structures. So it is your body's framework, and it is your bones and your joints and your connective tissue. We don't want to oversimplify it to just the bones alone. So, but its job is, it's got a couple of different jobs. It provides us with a framework, that protects all of our delicate structures. You can see here, like all of your most vital organs, your heart and your lungs, for instance, are kind of protected by your rib cage there. It gives us a resting ground for our muscles, so that our muscles have something to sort of like move around on. And then it also acts as levers, which is probably the most important thing that we are talking about as like, movement professionals. You know what I mean? Like when we look at like the way like you look at like how your muscles and your bones are sort of attached together. That's a great picture right there, actually. You can kind of see, right? If we look, this is your thigh bone here, right? So you'll have like muscle be attached from one end, and then it crosses over from one bone to the next, and it inserts on that bone down here, so that when these hamstring muscles contract, it's going to cause like this rotation around this axis right here. And so you'll have what is called knee flexion. My bicep, it's going to run from over here all the way down, and it's going to insert onto my forearm, very similar. You know, like your hamstrings and your biceps look pretty much exactly the same. So you can see there's the exact same sort of like organization there, right? It's going to start, you know, half of the muscle fiber starts on this part of the bone here, and then half it starts on this bone that's over here. That's your scapula, and that's your humerus there. And then it runs down and it grabs, you know, right here on your forearm, right? And that way, you can kind of flex and bend that elbow as it's sort of going through that range of motion. And so your muscles wouldn't have anything to attach to, and it wouldn't be able to manipulate, you know, like what's interesting is like, if I wanted to move something down here, I'm manipulating this muscle up here so that like this long, hard lever, you know, is going to be sort of manipulated there, right? So I wouldn't be able to like move, let's say a can of soda, you know, from here up to like my mouth if it wasn't for like this completely on the opposite end attachment there. You know, if this ran from here to here, that would actually have like a stronger like angle of pull, but it'd be a very awkward looking muscle, and it would be very difficult to like, you know, be shaped in such a way that would allow for movement in both directions. It would really just kind of be good at moving in one direction. So that's why this is sort of shaped the way it is. And, you know, that's one of the things that we are sort of analyzing today. So your bones, by definition, you know, those, they're, like I said, they're providing a resting ground, and they're the ones that are protecting your vital organs. And then your joints are the junctions where your bones are coming together. And that's actually where all the movement occurs, you know, is at these joints. We're going to call that an articulation, by the way. You're going to see that term a lot. You know, in fact, a lot of times, like you're going to hear the term like arthrokinematics, which is like a really big long term. It means joint motion. You know, kinematic means motion, and then arthro is talking about like the actual joints. And so that's where we get the term joint motion. But an articulation is very different than like when you are articulating, like when you're talking and stuff. But like it is where it's another name for your joints. It's where two or more bones are coming together. And so those two bones, right, if you kind of look at like how my knuckles are kind of feeding into one another, right, my knuckles are articulating with one another, which is actually why, you know, it is associated with talking, because like, you know, you're bringing your teeth together and stuff. So that's where the other version of that definition kind of comes in. I'm articulating my feelings, you know, like this is where the bones are coming together. So an articulation is another name for a joint. They'll use those terms kind of interchangeably. So just be, you know, whenever you're taking your test someday, just remember like both those things are kind of interchangeable. They really do kind of mean exactly the same thing. So when we're looking at this, you know, at your skeletal system, one of the biggest things that we are going to talk a lot about is like how your skeletal system like grows and how it matures, how it's affected by things like posture and even like your nutrition, right? So for instance, like you look at like having like bad nutrition. Let's say you're not getting enough protein in your diet. A lot of your skeletal system is made up of proteins. Let's say you're not getting enough calcium in your diet. Your calcium obviously is making up like the very hard parts of your bones, or maybe not enough phosphorus. We don't really think of like phosphorus, but like fats are actually really important for your bones. Like things like olive oils, you know, this is actually a really important thing to have in your diet, because like your skeletal system is not just calcium. I know that we often like say calcium when we're talking about like bones and stuff, but it's actually calcium phosphate. That's actually what your skeletal system really is. It's a little bit of phosphorus and a little bit of calcium coming together. And so that's what we're seeing right here. You know, that's sort of a fossilized piece of protein, which is, you know, what we call a bone, right? And so it comes together and forms these kind of really cool shapes here. We'll be looking more at that in just a moment. But you know, that calcium phosphate, you need to have like plenty of phosphorus in your diet as well. So again, if you're not getting enough healthy fats in your diet or enough healthy proteins, you're not getting any calcium. Or if you're eating things that like actually cause you to lose calcium. So for instance, like high sodium diets, sodium and calcium really like to kind of like work together as well. And so like when you have like a ton of sodium in your diet, that actually decreases your immune system's ability to mineralize bones sometimes. And I mean like really extreme amounts of sodium, but it can happen. So poor nutrition status can definitely lead to decreased bone density. And you think about like what your bones look like, right? It's kind of this like interesting honeycomb shape. When you zoom in on it, you know, it's these kind of rings that look like this. But then if you zoom in even further, you know, very microscopically, this is what your bones look like. It's this kind of honeycomb, you know, shape like this. Now, we want to make sure this stuff isn't going to break, right? Like it's like pumice stone. If you've ever, you know,
It's like a lava rock, right?
yeah, lava rock. That's another term for it. Yeah, like yeah, you look at like this stuff. It's like you look at it, it's like, oh, that rock must weigh a lot. It totally does not. No, it's actually very light because of how many holes it has in it. This is exactly what your skeletal system looks like. I'm actually gonna get what kind of minerals? What kind of minerals are in pumice stone? Silicon. Oh no, I was actually kind of I was wondering if it was like, you know, calcium and phosphorus. So that's what you're going to find in like a lava rock, right? And that's kind of similar to how your bones look, you know, very, very, very similar shape here. So, you know, think about lava rocks. When I was a kid, my dad, I remember like my dad was showing me, like, we went to Utah and he was showing me like a lava rock for the first time. And he was like, you want to see something cool? And he picks up this rock, and I haven't picked one up yet. So I don't know how light they are. I don't know what they are like. And he grabs it and he's like, and he breaks it in half. And my mind was blown.
That's right.
You know, like, and I was just like, my dad is so strong, you know. So it just got, you know, it was such a fun moment. And we totally took some home with us, and you're not supposed to do that, but yeah. So your bones, the reason he was able to do that is because it's not actually very dense. You know, there's a lot of holes within pumice stone. Well, if your bones are not very dense, what's going to happen? They're easy to break, right? Mm-hmm. Exactly. So we definitely know that like decreased bone density is what is something that we are trying to avoid as often as we can. When you have decreased bone density, we call that osteoporosis. So your bone tissue will actually look something kind of like this. You can see this is very much like a much less dense bone here, kind of this version on the left versus this version here versus this version here. And look at how many holes are in this bone here. And so they look for this in like elderly patients. They'll look for, and they're like, if they see like kind of a dramatic drop in body weight, but then they look at their body composition and they look, and it's like, you look similar, but you weigh way less. Like they're like, oh, we got to check for osteoporosis, you know. And it's because the bone density is decreasing. And so it might end up looking, you know, something kind of like this on a microscopic level, right? Where it's just not as dense. And that's much more likely to experience like hip fractures and broken bones and things like that. So we are trying to avoid that as much as possible. So poor nutrition can lead to that, but also physical inactivity can contribute to that as well. And that seems kind of interesting because it's like, you know, because what's interesting about like your bones is they grow in the same way that your muscles do. Now, we actually don't 100% understand why our DNA is programmed like this, but it is with bones as it is with muscles. When you exercise your muscles, you create cellular damage, right? That's what's the dirty kind of secret that we know about building muscle, right? Is like, you don't actually build muscle in the gym. When you're at the gym, you're actually breaking down muscle. You're actually damaging your muscle. You are diminishing it. You're building muscle in the kitchen after you work out, right? Yeah, and sleeping. Yeah, exactly. So that's when you build. The same thing is true of your bones. When you're in the gym, you know, you think about like lifting like a big heavy weight, right? Let's say I've got like a 25-pound dumbbell in my arm and I do like a lateral raise out here, right? Well, my deltoid muscle, which, you know, runs from about here and it kind of comes across and it inserts, you know, about halfway down my humerus here, right? Well, you know, and I've got this big, and then like, you know, there's all this and it's kind of locked out. Well, you think about it, it's like tying a dumbbell to the end of like a broomstick, right? Like a wooden broomstick, and you're holding it out. And then that broomstick is just like trying to deal with this big heavy weight, and it's probably flexing and bending, and all the little wooden fibers in that stick are like crack, 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 right? Same thing is happening to your bones. When you do like lifting weights, like heavy weight in particular, it fractures your bones on a very microscopic level. It's like little tiny breaks. And then you go get some calcium in your diet, you go get some protein, some phosphorus, you get a nap, not a nap, go to bed. And your immune system comes by and it's like, what did you do? You broke all my bones, you know, like, and your immune system's like, God, and then it just gets to repairing, you know,
Yeah.
it builds it up. But what's fun is we don't necessarily know why this is this way, but our immune system is not programmed to fix things back to where they were. Our immune system is actually programmed to repair things stronger so that they'll be more resistant to damage next time. It's like your body's constantly trying to get ahead of the curve, you know, like the way I always describe it is it's like your body's like so annoyed. It's like, man, if you're going to keep breaking this down, I'm just going to make it bigger so you can't break it anymore. And then all of a sudden we go lift heavier weights. It's like, what did I say? You know,
Yeah.
stop it. You know,
Does that also apply for like sickness? Like, let's say like Rona and stuff like that. Like, let's say someone ends up getting it, and like once like their immune system fights it, whatever, and then like, does that basically help out?
in a way, kind of, yes. So like when, you know, that's one of the things that they look at, they say like, you know, for people who are getting vaccinated, you know, that's the reason I do that is because they're giving you sort of a version of the virus that your body can then have a hold of, and it can then say like, because basically one of the things your immune system does is just constantly running through your body, checking, think of it this way, it's checking name tags. It's like, hey, do you have Eddie's name? It's like, okay, you belong here, right? Next, come on, you know, and it's just constant. It's like a bouncer at a club at an event, like making sure that everybody's got tickets, you know?
Yeah.
And then there's this thing that gets in there that doesn't have the ticket. And that's how your immune system's like, oh, we got to kill this thing, right? And then that's when you start feeling sick, actually, because that's your immune system mounting a response. Which is why, for those of you who've got the, you know, like when you get the vaccine, like you do feel like crap for a couple of days, you know?
Oh man, I don't think what's worse, getting the vaccine or getting the actual virus. Because I
Definitely.
had Delta. I got Delta early July.
Did you?
Yeah, it was the worst. I had like a mild case of pneumonia, but my body fought through it for 2 weeks straight though, and
Right.
that's when I I just had enough of it, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go to the docs and see what they could find. And then they're like, yeah, like at first they didn't want to check up on my back, like they didn't want to do any x-rays or my chest or whatever.
Oh,
And then when they did, because I told them that I didn't feel so good, and yeah, they're like, yeah, it's a mild case of pneumonia. So they gave me like antibiotics, and I recovered in like 3 days.
yeah.
But yeah, man, now I got the antibodies and shit.
So there you go. Yeah. Now you've got antibodies, right? Because now
Yeah.
it's like your immune system, it's like, will not be fooled again. It's like, I know
Yeah.
anybody who looks, you know, anybody who's wearing that jacket, you know, like, again, like they're going to look for, you know, any other troublemakers coming in. You know what I mean? Like that's what your immune system is doing. So now it's like, you know, they got the wanted poster for coronavirus, you know, posted up and you're, you know, all the security guards know who to look for. That's a very oversimplified way of looking, you know, it's like Osmosis Jones, you know?
Yeah.
And
I haven't even gotten the vaccine yet, just because like, I mean, it already got me.
right. I will say, I think that they have said that I think you're good for like, because you'll be at like hyperimmune for like 90 days after.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that'll kind of diminish and you'll still have like some immunity because you've had it before. But I do know like that it's still possible to catch it. I mean, it's still possible to catch it with the vaccine. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah.
not 100% cured or anything. But if you ever do catch it again, one of the things that they are definitely seeing is that like people who catch it, if they had the vaccine, feel way better. They're like it's way less dangerous. They're just like, you know, feels kind of like just a bad cough. That's one of the things I was telling my parents recently because they were really on the fence about getting vaccinated, and I was like, and they were like, well, it doesn't even work 100%, and I'm like, you're right, but it does drop like your risk of like dying from this thing down to like,
That's true, because like when I had Delta, my dad got it too, but he already had he was fully vaccinated, so he has diabetes and then high blood pressure too. So I'm like, damn, he's definitely in danger. He didn't get it, right? But all he had is like you said, like just like really mild things, like just like lost the taste of smell, like a
yeah.
small cough for like a couple of days, and then he recuperated like pretty quickly.
Oh, love to hear that.
Yeah, so that vaccine does wonders, but
Yeah.
I mean it's fine.
I will say, man, for me, both of them ruined me. Like messed me up. God, both of them. Like I was so sick both times. And some people were like, I'm like my roommate, he's like, I feel a little achy. And I was like, and like me, meanwhile, I didn't leave my bed for like 2 straight days. I was just like, like
Damn.
it was bad.
Yeah, terrible.
Thank God you guys are good now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
man. Like no repercussions, nothing. I actually came back stronger. Like I
There
don't
you go.
know. It's
There you go.
insane. Like I started working out again, and I was doing some jump roping just to get my endurance back and everything. And
Yeah.
surprisingly, I picked it back up so fast after like a month of just like being out. It's because I let my body fully recovered afterwards for like 2 weeks afterwards.
Right. Yeah.
And that plays a huge role right there. So I'm like, I was surprised because like, people were just saying like, oh no, have long COVID symptoms, whatever, this and that, especially if it's like the one, the viral loaded, which is Delta, right? That has like
Yeah.
a lot of viral load compared to the original one. And I'm like, nah, I feel fine.
Love that. Hey, yeah. That's one other thing too, is like the physically active they're finding, which, like it makes me feel so good because it's like all the people I interact with in my life. But yeah, they say like the physically active are the ones who are, bouncing back faster. It's like get outdoors, get to working out.
Yeah, thank God for fitness. That's what I'm here, fucking trying to learn
Right?
everything and, change the world a bit, right? Because
Seriously. Definitely.
especially now with this pandemic, I feel like I'm pretty sure people are just becoming way more overweight, 10 times higher than before because everyone's just like laying at home, sitting down, doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Like I was talking about this, Thomas's. You guys might remember. I think I've brought this up a million times at this point, but I say it all the time. Like if you look at human history, every time there's like a big virus or something like this, or just like even just like when there's like during the world wars and stuff, whenever there's like a lot of like human strife and anxiety in the world, the fitness community blows up over the next few years, like afterwards.
Yeah.
So this industry is going to be booming, after this whole thing is over.
So you're saying that we're gonna be rich?
Oh,
I'm not gonna make any guarantees because I like to think I'm a little wiser than that, but I mean, I am excited about my own prospects, and I hope you guys join me in that.
Yeah, no, I can see that though. That's why I was like, why not? Like the love of fitness that I have, it's like, why not just, become certified, and then I'm sure like I said, like people are gonna realize like, all right, it's time to get healthy, and then like they're trying to find for answers, but they can't because you can't get them anywhere unless you hired a trainer. Not even a doctor could tell you these things like, hey, like you gotta count your macros, or you gotta hit these workouts, for your goals. Now they don't tell you that, so that's our job for us to take over and like you said, right, freaking make the bucks.
Yeah, get people moving.
Mhm.
All right, so that's osteoporosis, and that's what a healthy skeletal system, that's what we're trying to avoid, is that osteoporosis, right? So so the skeletal system, very vital part of things, huge part of human movement because it's interacting with our muscular system. It gives our muscular system something to move, and your muscles are going to be attached with these big long tendons, right? When you look at it, this little white section here, you have like the muscle belly, which is the bright red section, and it kind of becomes this little white bit before it inserts onto the bone. Those are the tendons that we are kind of talking about there, right? So you can see every muscle in the body is going to attach with these little tendons here on either end. We'll talk more about those tomorrow when we get into the muscular system, but like I said, the bones are going to be the resting ground for the muscles. The joints are the places where they're meeting, and we sometimes call those articulations. So there's two primary divisions of your skeletal system. There is the axial section of your skeletal system, and there's the appendicular section. Okay, so axial, axial means like close to the midline. So we would call this like your axial line. So the stuff that's basically most center is your axial skeleton. If we take a look right here, that is going to be your skull, your spine, so all of your vertebrae, and your rib cage. Okay, so this is the axial section right here. And then the appendicular section are your appendages, right? It's your arms and your legs. So your pelvis, which gives you an attachment site for your legs to attach onto, and then it sort of is interacting with the axial section. And then your scapula and collarbone, which is the attachment site for your arms, and gives you a connection between your axial skeleton. So those are the two primary divisions there, right? The axial, that's a little bit better. The axial and appendicular sections. Looking at that, we were talking a little bit about bone growth, right? We were talking about how when we exercise, we're actually creating a little bit of like cellular damage, and then our immune system comes along and sort of repairs that cellular damage. It's like, if you need to remodel your kitchen, right? You have to go in and you have to do a demo first. You have to demolish all of the old cabinets, rip out the flooring and the backsplash and all that. You got to take all that stuff and get rid of it so that you can bring in the new cabinets and countertops and whatever. I actually don't know how to remodel a kitchen, but but it's a good analogy. And so we actually call that process inside of our body, when we're talking about the skeletal system, we call that process bone remodeling. Okay, so bone remodeling is the process of doing what's called resorption or resorbing and forming new bone tissue. Why we have to use the word resorbing, I don't know. It literally means it sounds like reabsorb, and that's actually exactly what it is. Why we'd have to have like a different word for that, I will never know. But resorb literally means to reabsorb. It means to break down like old tissue. So bone remodeling is the process of breaking down old bone tissue in order to make new, dense, strong, unbreakable new bone tissue, right? So we got two cells that are primarily responsible for that. And these are called your osteocytes, okay? The first one is what is known as your osteoclasts, okay? Osteoclasts are bone breaker downers. Their job is to resorb old bone tissue. I wonder if I can find a GIF of this actually. So actually, if you look at it, they kind of work like this. They're kind of like running along the surface, and you see how like they're kind of eating all this old bone tissue, right? They're kind of like scraping it all up, and they kind of work their way along the surface, and they eat your bones, right? Now that sounds like these are kind of the bad guys, it's like, because we want to have dense bones. That sounds like it's a bad thing. But again, in order to like have the ability to lay down new, stronger bone tissue, you got to rip out those old cabinets. So we actually really like osteoclasts. This is a really good process that's happening, because like when you have imperfect bone, the osteoclasts are going to come along and they're going to eat away any of those imperfections, which you're going to have imperfections because when you're physically active, you're creating a little bit of like cellular damage, right? You're fracturing your bones a little bit, right? And so then these guys are going to come along and they're going to kind of, eat up all of that old bone tissue. Now, afterwards, what's really cool is you're going to have osteoblasts, which are sort of the opposite of osteoclasts. And osteoblasts build up new bone tissue. These are your bone makers, right? So you got osteoclast. You can think like when you hear clast, think like clashing, right? And it's like breaking down old bone tissue. And then osteoblast actually comes from the word that means like blastula.
Blastoise.
What's that? Or blastoise, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what a blastula is, it's basically like a group of cells that's being blasted into existence, right? This is actually like a big, like, cellular growth situation. What is blast? Latin meaning. It means inspiration. So it means to like make something, right? And so osteoblasts are coming along, and they're going to build up new bone tissue, right? So basically, they're going to kind of come along, and you'll see they're sort of like slowly kind of creating like more calcium and more dense bone tissue, right? They're kind of building things up afterwards, right? So you can see like all this like damaged tissue here, and then they're coming along and they're laying down all this stuff that's building up new tissue and like smoothing it all out, right? And that's what we really want to see. So these guys actually kind of work together. In fact, the osteoclasts, which are the bone breaker downers, in order to make sure that they don't continue eating your bone tissue and damaging it and breaking it down, what they do is they actually go through this process that any of your cells can go through called apoptosis. And apoptosis is like one of the coolest things that your body does. It is literally where a cell is programmed to self-destruct. And so it just goes, and the osteoclasts, they've been eating all this calcium, right? And they've kind of been breaking this stuff down and like, damage, smoothing, breaking out your bone tissue. And then they self-destruct. So all that calcium gets released into the area. And then those osteoblasts are coming along afterwards. And what the osteoblasts do is they actually kind of spit out this kind of glue-like structure, this like material that attracts calcium ions. So because the osteoclasts released all this calcium into the area, the osteoblasts lay down this glue-like structure, and that attracts all that calcium. That's how they're working together to make your new bone tissue. So they are supposed to work together. Now, here's what's interesting, though. When we're kids, our osteoblasts, the bone makers, they're super, super, super active. They're constantly just making new bone tissue, and that's as we're growing, right? But as we get older, weirdly, our osteoclasts become more active. And that's why the elderly struggle with bone density. And we'll talk more about that later this mod when we break down osteoporosis. And we start talking about that. As we get older, we do see that like the bone breaker downers become more active. And that's why generally it's the elderly who are struggling with bone density issues. So that's bone remodeling. They loved it. This is a classic example of like the types of questions that make kind of good test questions, because it's like you can see like because there's two categories like osteoblasts or osteoclasts, that makes a really good multiple choice question. So I always put a little emphasis on this because these are free points if you just remember, what these two types of cells are. Remodeling, what's one of the coolest things about bone remodeling, there's a concept called Davis's law. And it says that bone remodeling tends to follow the lines of stress that are placed on your bones. Now, I remember yesterday I told you guys, if you ever want to understand how this universe operates, right, remember that function follows form. If you shape things a certain way, they will behave a certain way, right? Or in order to be able to behave a certain way, we need something to be shaped a certain way. This is a constant like form function connection. So if we understand that like our bones sort of remodel themselves along the lines of stress, this is one of the reasons why good posture is so important. Because exercise and habitual good posture, constantly having a good posture and sitting the way we're supposed to and resting our bones the way we're supposed to will create a healthy skeletal system versus incorrect exercise coupled with generally poor alignment often leads to a remodeling that reinforces that bad posture. This is where when you see like, when you see like older folks who have that like, sort of hunchback posture that we sometimes tend to see, right? This kind of thing here, right? It's not like their bones are shaped any differently. right? Like their bones they're supposed to be, they have the same bones that they used to, right? But what has happened is through consistent poor posture, come on, hook me up with the picture that I know exists. I've seen it a million times, but I can't find it. What has happened slowly over time is we get what's called degenerative joint disease or degenerative disc disease sometimes. And you can see like here's a healthy alignment for the most part of a spine, but as somebody ends up having like poor posture overall, like look at how there's a little bit of a natural lumbar curve here. And then look at this picture over here. See how much straighter this one is, right? You would think that like, oh, that's what we want, right? We want the spine to be straight. It's like, nah, your spine's supposed to have a natural lumbar curve to it. Not too much, but also definitely not too little. And so here we see no curve. And so what's happening is like the amount of space between the discs, right, gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And, you know, that's because of like bone density issues and then like poor alignment. And so like the more you train your body into poor posture, the more likely it is to develop in that poor posture because that's how it's growing, you know? Best way I can always think about this is, and I always have a hard time. I can remember how to Google this picture. Sidewalk worn in grass. If that works. Oh yeah, perfect. Look at this. Right, you can tell well people are going this way. Like,
Yeah.
the sidewalk probably goes over here and then like this way, but nobody's taking the time to go around. They're just going through here, right?
Yeah.
Function again and form, right? This looks this way because they should have built a walk path this way, because that's where people are headed, right? Or look at this one. It's like clearly like literally right next to the walking path. But it's like nobody wants to, you know, people are taking a shortcut all over. And so that's what gets worn in.
But you know what's crazy about that? You know what's crazy about that? Okay, so like that takes a lot of time, that little dirt.
Sure.
So
yeah.
It didn't just happen by only one person walking that exact way, right? Somebody walked the exact way one time and nothing happened. 2 times, nothing happened. 100 times, maybe nothing happened. You know what I'm saying?
But 1,000 times.
Yeah, and finally. So maybe it was the same guy.
Yeah. I imagine it was a lot of people. You know, you ever it's so funny when you look at like those old things. God, this reminds me, this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but it's like using the same see if I can find this picture. Somebody showed me this the other day. Yeah, it was like their grandparents' spoon. Look at how the end is worn out, where they were stirring the same coffee every single day.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's years and years and years of it, right? That's happening to our discs. You know, like that, I think of that walk path, that pops into my brain whenever I'm trying to tell someone why it's so important to like maintain good posture. So anyway, that's Davis's law. That talks about how hard tissue will sort of like model itself along like the way that we move, and that's why like it's always good and, you know, important to like have good form when we're doing deadlifts and things, you know, especially deadlifts, because that's the one that always throws everybody's back out. But like barbell squats or bench presses, all of it's important to make sure that we're moving the way we're designed. So types of bones that we've got. We got all kinds of different types of bones in the body. They are not very fancy in their names. You got long bones, guess what? Those are the bones that are longer than they are anything else. You got short bones. Guess what? Those are the short bones. You got flat bones, which are flat. And you got irregular bones, which are like, it's like scientists ran out of names. So they're all the funky, weird shaped bones. Your spine is a really good example because they got all these really interesting looking processes on them. But those are sort of the 4 major categories of bones. Long bones, which are long and cylindrical. Your humerus and your femur are really good examples of that, right? Humerus is this bone right here. Femur is the longest bone in your body. That's what we're seeing in this picture right here. You know, this is up at the thigh. Whenever you hear about like someone breaking their hip, they're often talking about like getting a fracture right along this area here. This is the longest bone in your body. It's that classic like caveman weapon bone, right? And then you got short bones, which are like the carpals of your hands, or the tarsals of your feet are really good examples of this, right? Carpals. You know, they look really similar, your hands and your feet. And so like the carpals of your wrist, right? Those are right here. Then you get your metacarpals, and then you get your fingertips. Those are what we call your phalanges, actually. But those are actually an example of like your metacarpals and your phalanges. Those are both long bones. You know, they're not as long, obviously, as like your arm here, but like they are still very long. They are longer than they are anything else. So that's their sort of defining characteristic. Same thing is true in your feet. You can see if you look at your feet, we've got all of the tarsals, and then you've got the long bridge of your foot. Those are your metatarsals. And then you get your phalanges, which are like the toes, right? That's actually that classic structure of going from that classic example of going from like one big long bone here to two bones here in your forearm. If you take a look, you can see that in your arms and in your legs, right? It goes from one bone to two bones to lots of bones in the wrist, in eventually ending in digits. Same thing happens in your leg, one bone, two bones, lots of bones and digits. That is one of the things that we see that makes us a mammal. We see that in pretty much all mammals. We see that's called the one bone, two bone structure. So here's a very weird example, but like you can see, whoops. You can see here's like a rabbit and a horse, right? So we see like one bone, and then there's their shoulder blade, right? So one bone, two bones, lots of bones, and little digits at the end there. And same thing is true of a horse, you know? Same thing is true of even a whale. Which is, you know, still a mammal, but very, very different looking, you know, creatures. But one, two, lots, which they've kind of fused together for the sake of this exhibit, and then digits, right? So that's kind of fun, right? That's the one bone, two bone structure. Sounds like a Dr. Seuss book. But that's, you got long bones, which are the long, short bones, like the carpals of your feet, carpals of your hands, tarsals of your feet. Then you get flat bones. That's like your scapula or your pelvis, right? Or even your patella, your kneecap is actually considered a flat bone. And then you've got your vertebrae, which are the really weird, we call those irregular bones, right? The oddly shaped ones that are very specific to a very specific function. Your discs in your spine are very unique. So we call those irregular bones. Now, there is one category that is not different from these, but one other term that we're also going to see is like a sesamoid bone. So your patella is an example of a sesamoid. It is also a flat bone. It is flatter than it is anything else. So its shape is a flat bone. But what makes it a sesamoid bone is it's a bone that is embedded around a joint capsule. So what's kind of cool about your patella is, what's cool about your kneecap is it actually lives underneath some other connective tissue. So your patella is this little bone right here, and it's, you know, this is what it sort of looks like whenever there's not any other tissue around. You can see here, it just kind of sits on top here, right? That's your kneecap, right? That's why it's a flat bone. But take a look here at this picture. You can see it actually lives underneath this little tissue right here. So that's a sesamoid bone, right? It's a bone that is sort of embedded in other connected tissue. You've got some other sesamoids, like in your toes, for instance. Kind of weird looking, but you can see there's these little tiny bones that actually live right here in your feet. They're itty bitty, you know, but those are little sesamoid bones. And basically what the sesamoid bone does is actually, there we go. This is why when you ask people how many bones are in the body, there's like a little bit of disagreement. It's like nobody can say how many, because it's like we all have slightly different definitions. I say there's 208. But that's, these technically are fused to this bone. So it's like, are they their own bone, or, are they separate? Like, what is it? This is also why babies have more bones than adults do, because eventually the several bones that they have sort of fuse together. That's why babies have like the soft spot up here, and then it sort of slowly fuses together. And now you can, you don't have to be worried about it. So that is what a sesamoid bone is. It kind of lives in connective tissue, kind of underneath it. The classic example is the patella, and we'll talk a lot about how the patella moves when we get to the knee joint, because it's really cool the kind of motions that it's able to make. So those are the types of bones. Now, on all of the types of bones we've got all these different bones throughout the body. We got these really cool markings on our bones. Okay, and those bone markings are two major categories. You're either going to see depressions or you're going to see processes. Okay, a depression is like a dent in a bone, and a process is basically a projection from a bone. Okay, so bone markings are these special dents or projections that allow muscles to attach or ligaments to attach much more effectively, right? So depressions are like flattened or indented portions, right? You can see here on the spine of the scapula, there's a big dent, right? And that allows a muscle to kind of rest up here, called your supraspinatus. It's this little muscle right here that lives on top of your scapula, right? The little green muscle in this picture, right? And so because of that little dent right there, it's able to have like a nice house to kind of live in. And so these processes, if we look at like, if you look at like the muscles, like you've got this big process on the outside of the femur, right? Look at this freaking process right here. That's called the greater trochanter of your femur. Well, you've got a lot of muscles in your hip that are going to attach to that, right? You take a look, here's your piriformis, and then there's your what's called your TFL. And then you can see there's the piriformis. This is actually your glute muscle right here. And so your gluteus muscle is able to get an attachment because of this big knob right here. So that's the bone markings that we've got. All of your bones, right? Whether they're long, short, flat, irregular, they have these markings on them that allow your muscles to get a really good attachment. The depressions are dents, and the processes are projections. And there's a lot of different types of them. Depressions you'll hear are sometimes called fossas or sulcuses. Processes you'll hear of, like sometimes you'll hear the term condyles or epicondyles, tubercles or trochanters. A lot of different like little projections from there, but we're not going to make you memorize all those. In a very advanced kinesiology course, you'll sometimes have to memorize like all these tubercles and all these processes and trochanters and blah blah blah. We're not going to make you do that in our course, and NASM doesn't care if you get really deep into that stuff. Really, we just want to understand like the general idea that like we've got these bone markings here. And honestly, like having them all memorized has never really even served me, like that's not the type of role that I've been in. If I were like a very, like if I was like a orthopedic surgeon or something, I'd be looking at like processes, but that's not really our role. But I do want you guys to know about them in general, because sometimes you'll hear of stuff called like bursitis, right? Bursitis is where the connective tissue that we haven't really talked about just yet, you've got these things called bursa. Bursa are these little fluid-filled sacs, okay? And they live around our joints. They're there to kind of help with friction and stuff. And so there's a bursa on the side of your hip, like right where we talked about earlier. Bursitis, if you look at like the side of your hip here, sometimes you'll have a client who will get what is called runner's hip, right? If I look at seeing this like inflamed picture right here, I'll bet I could find the same picture if I type in runner's hip. you will see this inflammation of this area right here. And what that is it's where this little fluid filled sac, the muscle has to run along the greater trochanter, right? That big projection coming off the femur. And that thing is like, it's kind of sharp, it's hard bone tissue, right? So sometimes the muscles that are running along the outside of the hip there, they rub, they get inflamed, right? Because the soft connective tissue, because the muscle got really, really tight, and now the connective tissue can get inflamed. So we have to understand that, like, why did that happen? Well, our soft tissue is rubbing on our hard tissue. And so understanding a little bit about like those projections and a little bit about those shapes, I feel like it always gives us a really good understanding. It's sort of the story behind the injury, and I'm always trying to explain that to my clients. They're like, God, why did that, why did I get this plantar fasciitis? Why did that happen? It's like, well, you got to remember that like your soft tissue tightened up and it's rubbing along these projections that we have in like our heel bone. And so now your soft tissue is rubbing against your hard tissue. And the way I always like to describe to my clients, I'm like, take your hands, go like this. And now go like this. Okay, now don't stop for the next 12 hours.
Oh, come on.
Like,
You spark fire.
Exactly, right? Like by the end of the day, it's like your hands are just going to be raw, like that's what's happening to your muscles. Like it's rubbing on this hard tissue, except, my hands are soft on both sides. Now imagine, doing it to like the side of your desk all day, like it's going to get real raw by the end of the day. So that's fasciitis or any of the itises, really, tendonitis or whatever. So other bones that we've got, you got your vertebral column, right? You're all the interesting discs. Your vertebrae is going to be split into a couple different sections. You've got your cervical vertebrae, that's your neck. You got your thoracic vertebrae, that's your upper back, which I obviously can't touch. That's this section right here. You get your lumbar vertebrae, that's your low back. And then you get your sacrum, which is your this little triangular shaped bone that puts the two pelvic bones together and gives them something to grab onto. And then at the very bottom, we've got the remainder of our tail from where we used to be apes, which is our coccyx. That's your tailbone. So you can see these kind of different sections here. And again, this is a greatly shaped spine. This is a perfectly shaped spine right here in this picture. And it's not perfectly straight. It makes this kind of S curve, right? You can see all the discs have a good amount of space in between them, right? That's exactly what we're looking for. So if we flatten our spine out, if we have sort of a rounded back posture, we call that lumbar kyphosis. It's like a straight spine, right? And nobody's drawing this the way I want them to. Hold on. I guess that works actually. So you can see, right, in this, what the heck? Open. Oh no, it's a, okay, well, that's all right. We'll just look at it this way. It's like a downloadable only picture. So you can see here's like a flattened portion, right? And you can see what is that doing to this portion of the discs here. See how there's a gap of space back here and this space is being like collapsed in on, right? So that's putting pressure on this part of the disc. So now the soft tissue that lives between my spinal discs, if I've got posture like this, it's going to hurt, it's going to be painful, right? It's going to pinch. And that could happen on the other end too, right? Like over here, you can see, there's a gap over here and there's kind of a pinching section there. So your discs are meant to be stacked in such a way that they have a healthy amount of space between them. But sometimes you'll end up with like what's called a herniation, where the soft tissue in our discs actually gets torn. So we have to understand like these kind of, we just want to be familiar with these sections here. Your cervical vertebrae, those are your C, 1 through 7. You got your thoracic vertebrae, that's your T, 1 through 12. Your lumbar vertebrae, that's your L, 1 through 5. And then you get your S1 through 5. Your sacrum, it's like it does have like S1, S2, S3, but it's all kind of fused together in one big bone. And then you get your tailbone, which is your coccyx. Oftentimes, I'm sure you guys have heard somebody describing like back problems. They'll say their L1 through their L5. That's what got hurt. Mir, I'd be curious to know. I mean, I know you didn't get it checked out, but I'd be curious to know which part of your back got hurt. It was probably, was it your lower back or upper?
It was lower. On that picture, I can't really like see to zoom in what it says, but it's okay, yeah, like the lumbar, bro. It was so much lumbar, the lower part.
Yeah, it was probably L4, L5, these bottom two right here. Like this is L1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Usually most people that I know, they have problems in L4, L5. That's the most, because it's the bottom. You think about it, it's like the, where's the Jenga stack, feeling the most pressure? Well, the bottom of it, like everything's stacked on top.
And it still hurts, like.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
It still hurts every single day. Like it goes away a little bit, kind of when like I get my blood going, my body warm.
Yeah.
But like when I wake up, it's like I got to be careful how I get out of bed.
Sure. Yeah. Your discs. Yeah. When you're sleeping, the other thing is like you're laying all night.
Yeah.
This is actually why like it's a good idea to stretch in the morning, guys. But word of advice that I've told people for years now. I love wake up, stretch out. But avoid any excessive spinal stretching, like spinal twists and things like that.
Yeah, I don't do that
for about 20 minutes until after you've been upright for a little while. It gives your discs time to kind of drain some of that fluid out of there and get the fluid moving around your body. So if you're going to stretch in the morning, start with like the arms and the, maybe like the quads and stuff, get the calves going. And then 20 minutes in or so, then you can get into your spine. Like, but don't.
You know what's weird though? Stretching makes me like really tired.
Oh yeah.
Like, if I stretch for like if I stretch my whole body for like 30 minutes, like one time I was going to work at 4 o'clock in the morning with my buddy from church, and we would go to the gym before, so we'd be at the gym at like 5. And dude, he works out like crazy. And like the third day I couldn't do it anymore, so I just stretched for like the whole hour that we were there. Dude, I was more tired than if I were to like do like a crazy legs, like an entire body work.
I mean, think about like how much tension you're driving into your body. You get like a big release afterwards, so it makes you a little tired. So that's the different sections of our spine. We'll talk more about that. Like, obviously, like I said, we're going to talk about all these different joints as we get into the body parts. That's sort of the second half of this course, right? But there's sort of the foundational section of our vertebrae. And like I said, you can find the information that we're talking about here on pages 36 through 39 of the trail guide. Now you will notice page 17 through 33. That is a huge amount of pages in your regular textbook. But that is only because let's see here. That is only because you will see this several pages of all of these muscles. You'll see all these pictures of stuff like this in your textbook. Like this is your rectus femoris, for instance.
That was that's in the trail guide, you said? 17
this picture is not. This is actually from NASA. But your trail guide, page 36 through 39, it'll have some pictures of just bones in general. But notice how many, this is like a ton of pages. I don't expect you guys to like go through all these pages right here today. I put this in here because this is where you'll find some pictures of this stuff. But there's so many like pictures in those pages. So take a look at them, but don't feel like you have to read, what is that? 16 pages today. You know what I mean? Like, don't feel like you have to like read 16 pages today. Just go ahead and take a look at some of the pictures. That's really all I want you to kind of start getting familiar with. So let's shift gears a little bit. We've been talking a lot about bones. Let's start talking a little bit about joints instead. So joints are where one bone is articulating with another, right? That's why we call that an articulation. And then you're going to see my least favorite term in the world here, which is arthrokinematics. I hate this term because the definition for this is literally joint motion. And the definition is shorter than the word.
Word.
Why do we have that word?
Yeah. It's like a World Wide Web and www.
Yeah,
There's more
right, yeah.
W
So
than there is
weird.
World Wide Web. Yeah.
We're saying PIN number, like
Yeah.
PIN stands for personal identification number. You're saying, if you say PIN number, you're saying personal identification number.
Yeah, you say it twice.
So anyway, so arthrokinematics, right? Arthro means like joint, and kinematic means motion. And so that's where we're getting this definition here. Now, when we're talking about arthrokinematics, we're talking about three primary types of movements that occur in our joints. Those three primary types of movements are rolling, which is where the surface of one joint rolls across the surface of another. So like I'm doing sort of a rolling action here with my knuckles along my palm. There's also sliding, which is where one joint surface slides across the surface of another bone. And then there's a spinning, which would be, if I've got like sort of, if I'm cupping this in sort of a C shape here, and I'm spinning along it kind of like that, right? So that's a spinning action. So you'll see, like rolling action here. See if I can find a GIF. You know what? I'll just look up what I know I can find. Brain. Knee joint. So if we look at the knee joint, right, you'll see this is what's called a hinge joint here. We'll talk about that in just a second. Is this GIF not going to start going? So you can see kind of a rolling action that's occurring here, right? That's not the best picture. Let's see. There we go. That's perfect. So you can see kind of a rolling action that's sort of occurring here, right? Yeah. But you will also notice in the knee, see that at the end there? Oh, wow, this is a long GIF. Oh, it's showing like arthritis. This is actually a joint that's like, this is showing like, the slow articular damage that happens over time.
Oh, wow. Is it that dramatic though? Like it just peels off like that, like a potato skin?
No. This is like what happens with knee. This is what they do. They shave it down and then they drill into it, and then they're going to put plastic pieces on the end here.
That's crazy.
This is a long GIF. Yeah, this is a knee replacement.
The movie.
That's wild. And then they fix the patella at the end there. But here you can see there's the rolling, but you also see that little sliding action. There's also a gliding action that also occurs in the knee joint as well. Both of those things actually happen in the knee. So there's the rolling part, but see how it does like a little bit of a slide there at the end. When it gets into place, it kind of locks in place there. Yeah. So the knee joint actually has both of those, a gliding or sliding and rolling action. So rolling is when one joint surface rolls over another. Sliding is when one slides across another. And then spinning occurs when one sort of, let's see here, internal. For bone. God dang it. Ugh, why is this so hard to find today? Help me out, internet. Give me the GIF I'm looking for. You know, pronation, supination. There we go. All right. So there's the spinning action, right? You can see right up here, take a look at this part right here. That surface is spinning across the other surface. And then obviously it's affecting things all the way down here, but that happens in your forearm whenever you're doing it. So those are the three primary. So every joint in your body pretty much relies on these three primary types of movements: rolling, sliding, and spinning. Now, there's a lot of different types of joints in your body, and most of them are synovial joints. Okay, so synovial joints is a big term. These are the joints that are held together with like a joint capsule. When you're thinking, like the joints that you're thinking of in your head right now, all these joints have been described, all the ones I've pulled up today, all of those are probably synovial joints. Okay, they're about 80% of the joints in your body are synovial. And that's a joint that has like a big cavity. There's a good amount of space between, bone 1 and bone 2. So there's a big cavity there. And then there's a lot of fluid called synovial fluid in that cavity. So if we look at synovial joints, right, your knee is a classic example because there's a good amount of space, between those two joints there. And then there's this big cavity. And then there's all this synovial fluid found in there as well. You can kind of see it's this kind of liquid filled area there. Synovial fluid kind of looks like egg whites. If you were to ever suck it out of the knee, it kind of looks similar. And it's like grease. It's this really viscous, really slick material. And it's there to make sure, yeah, there we go. That's some healthy synovial fluid there. And it's meant to act as sort of like grease for a hinge, and that keeps there from being way too much friction when our bones are moving around. Now, you do have non-synovial joints as well. These are joints that actually don't have a joint cavity, so there's very little space in the non-synovial joints. We don't talk too much about these because we don't really deal with non-synovial joints. But the non-synovial joints are going to be like what we call like a cartilaginous joint. There's two types here, cartilaginous and what are called fibrous. So a cartilaginous joint is, for instance, like where your two pelvic bones come together. This is called your pubic symphysis. And it's where this bone, there's three bones we're seeing in this picture here, right? There's your sacrum, that's your tailbone, or that's the bottom of your spine. And then we see the left side of our pelvis and the right side of our pelvis, right? And they come together. This is a little cartilaginous joint right here. So it's designed to do a little bit of movement like this, a little bit of movement, not a lot of movement though, right? This is not a synovial joint. We do not want that to move too much. If it does move too much, you're going to be in pain because, well, chances are your pelvis is no longer attached together, and that's going to require surgery to fix. You'll also sometimes see what are called fibrous joints, like the sutures of your skull. I remember earlier I mentioned like your pelvic bone is fused, your sacrum is fused together. That's technically a joint. It's a fibrous joint. Your skull is not one big bone. It's actually several bones all coming together, and there's these little sutures along them. Those are very much like fibrous joints. So we're going to spend our time talking about synovial joints because those are the ones that produce human movement, right? So synovial joints, there's a lot of different types. You have got what are called a gliding joint. Gliding joints are like the carpals of your hand. When you think about like your wrist moving around, right? All those little like cuboid bones kind of sliding and gliding along each other, right? You look at all those little tiny bones, they got to be able to kind of glide and slide. If you take your arm and you squeeze it together like this, you're actually squeezing these two bones right here, your radius and your ulna, you're actually squeezing them together. And so there's a little bit of gliding that's going to happen in your wrist. You do a little bit of that action there, right? The bones in your wrist, they got to just do a little bit of like, this motion and this motion, right? All that gliding action. You've also got what are called condyloid joints. Your knee, for instance, and that's where one condyle sort of fits into another. So a classic example of that is, well, they're actually showing the hand here. That's fine. So this is a condyloid joint right here. You take a look at it. You can see like where, there's sort of like a kind of a thing here, and it can kind of pretty much, move a little bit like this and a little bit like this, right? So like, if you look at like my hand here, right, I can do, hinging, but I can also do a little bit of side to side motion, right? I can do the Spock thing, right? So like
Yeah.
a little bit of this and a little bit of this, but it doesn't really do rotation very well. Like I can twist my finger a little, but like if I do it too much, it's popping out of the joint. Like that's not great. You know, like it's not a ball and socket joint. It's basically, it can go here and here, right? 2 planes of motion. That's a condyloid joint. Then you got hinge joints. Hinge joints, that's pretty much one motion. Your elbow, it does this, right? It doesn't do any side-to-side motion or anything like that. Now you might be thinking, well, it's like, well, it can spin. Well, that's actually because there's 2 bones there. Your elbow is a hinge joint. The actual elbow itself. Of course, they're showing the freaking knee here. Come on, internet. I feel like I'm working against Google today. So this comes here, but the spinning action's happening at this joint. But the actual elbow is this one right here. So that's only hinging. That's the only thing it can do. This rotational movement, that's a different joint. So hinges, like the hinges on a door, right? You've got a saddle joint. You've actually only got one of these, and you get 2 of them in your body, but they're the same. You got a left one and a right one. A saddle joint is really similar to a condyloid joint, except that it's got a little bit of extra motion here, and it sits like this. It sits kind of like a saddle, and the only ones that are in your body, your thumbs. So like, you know, your fingers can do this and this. Your thumb can do that as well, right? It can do this and this, right? But it can also do just a little bit of rotation. But you notice how like when you're doing your thumb in a circle, it kind of snaps when it gets to that one spot, right?
Yeah.
It jerks around really quickly. That's because it's not quite a ball and socket joint. It's a saddle joint. It's really close to ball and socket. It's like a halfway between condyloid and ball and socket. So, and that leads me to our pivot joint. Pivot joints really only move in like one direction, which is rotational. The other part of your elbow, other part of your elbow is a pivot joint. So you can see here, this is the hinge joint, but then where this bone is sort of interacting with this one and it does that spinning action, that's a pivot joint. And so we see that a little bit there. And then lastly, we got the biggest one, the most mobile, king of joints, the ball and socket joint. So there's 2 of them, which are your shoulder and your hips, okay? And basically, this is like a ball that sits in a little socket and it can move in all directions. It's the most mobile joint in your body, your shoulder and your hips. Those are the 2 most mobile joints that you've got. However, that's great because that means lots of movement, but what's not so great is with increased mobility, unfortunately comes decreased stability. So it is probably likely that you'll experience dislocation in these joints if you move them too much. And that's why we always hear about dislocated shoulders or dislocated hips when we're talking about like car accidents or falling off the roof, you know, things like that. So that's kind of a general rule of thumb when it comes to just human movement in general, guys. With increased mobility comes decreased stability. With great power comes great responsibility. Yeah. Any questions on these joints, guys? You feeling good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just following up.
Love it. We're moving pretty quick today. We got a lot of questions, but we're actually ahead of schedule here. We're about to wrap up.
Questions.
What's that?
I'm cool on questions.
Love it. Love it. Love it. All righty. Well, let's take a look at let's take a look at oh, actually, hold on. One more thing about joints. So joints, it's where your bones meet together, right? And again, they provide stability. But one thing to remember, and arguably, you know, this is maybe the most important concept of the day, not so much because you're going to be tested on it, but because it kind of lends into everything we're going to talk about when we start talking about posture. When you move one of your joints, it will move your other joints. That's a really big concept. This is why it's so important for us to pay attention to our foundation when we're talking about human movement. You know, when you look at, like, for instance, what's called pronation distortion syndrome. Okay, what that is, and this is something we will analyze. You can see a NASA workout there. That's our style of workout template. When you look at pronation distortion, what that is it's where someone's foot externally rotates like this in a natural posture instead of sitting forward. And then you can see there's a very little gap on the bottom of their feet here. It's where the feet sort of flatten and fall inwards. And what that leads to, you know, it's like, oh, well, so they have an ankle problem. And it's like, yeah, they have an ankle problem, but guess what? That's leading to knee problems. And guess what? That's leading to hip problems. So it travels.
When you move one of your joints, you move many or all?
It moves all of them. And then that hip, what does that affect? That affects your shoulder. That affects your spine. What does your spine affect? That affects your shoulders. So my kinesiology teacher made us read her senior thesis or whatever, because that's what all teachers do. They make you read their papers. She wrote an article about how ankle sprains basically can lead to shoulder impingement later in life on the opposite side. So like if you sprained your right ankle, it can lead to left shoulder impingement. And really what the article was all about was about how the whole body is connected, you know? But like that was how they observed that. They were like, you know, they found like a through line in the research of like, you know, so many people who sprained their ankle would eventually later. And it's because like, you know, it's like the ankle would move up and affect the knee, which would affect the hip. And so then they would be dropping their spine over to one side, and then that would put more pressure on the collarbone, which would then eventually affect the shoulder. So your whole body is connected. This is why we don't look at posture in isolation. We can look for a root cause and be like, it's your ankle. You know, don't get me wrong. Like we're going to pay, you know, we're going to look for the things that we can sort of affect and fix and stuff. But we got to remember that movement of one joint will directly affect the movement of your other joints.
Okay.
That's why our job exists, you know?
Yeah.
So you're not going to really be tested on that. Like that's not really going to be like a test question or anything, but like conceptually, it's arguably the most important thing we got to talk about. It's why, you know, personal trainers are out there. Like I was just talking to one of my roommates yesterday. So I keep telling him like, you go use the gym. And he's like, I can't. And I was like, why not? He's like, well, I mean, he's like, I'm waiting on getting this MRI. So he went to the doctor and he got an MRI because his knee has been hurting for years and years and years, by the way, years.
My knees hurt really bad too.
Yeah. So here's the thing, like he went and, you know, don't get me wrong, Mir, like you know, it could actually be an injury, but he thought that, because one time he got like an x-ray years ago, and they were like, oh yeah, he's like, your cartilage is messed up. You got a dent in the cartilage of your knee. And so he thought that's what was causing his knee pain. So he went and got the MRI finally after all these years. And they were looking at it. Where his knee pain is, he's got a dent on his dent's on the other side. So that dent is not affecting his knee at all, you know? So he's like, so why does my knee hurt? And the doctor was like, probably just because you have bad habits. He's like, you probably just have bad posture. You probably tuck your knee. You probably do all these things all day without really thinking about it. And he's like, you just need to stretch more. And his doctor is oversimplifying. This is where, you know, I'm not going to disagree with a doctor. They're much more trained than I am. But I will say this, doctors are trained to look at things from a medical perspective. We're trained to look at things from a postural perspective. So I agree that he needs to stretch. If he stretches, he'll get his mobility back. When he gets his mobility back, he'll be able to move his knee the way it's supposed to be able to move. But there's also a strengthening component as well, where you need to flip, you know, you need to stretch this side of the joint, but we need to flip over to the other side of the joint and we need to do a little strengthening over here. And so like, I'm going to give him an assessment later this week and we're going to sort of sit down and, you know, look at like chances are, and I'm going to call it right now. I'll give you guys an update in a couple of days. But I will bet you his posture, I'll bet he squats like this.
What is tucking the knee? What does that mean?
What's that?
Tucking
I
the
mean, like, I don't know if you guys do this where you do you know, one knee under the other, and then you sit down, you get the
Oh.
knee tuck. You know, it's just those little things. Like now, if I'm doing this, I'm sitting and I'm all, you know, tilted.
Yeah, I cross my feet sometimes, like at the ankles. So I don't know. They kind of go out. Yeah, the knees go outward, my hips go outward. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I gotta be mindful of that stuff too, because sometimes I'll be doing that, or even I have my feet up on my desk and I'm just like sitting down like that.
it's so tempting, right?
I did that literally like half hour ago. And then
So
when we
yeah.
were talking about all that stuff, I was like, yeah, I gotta fix my posture before it
Right?
gets worse.
And you know, it's okay to sit like that sometimes. It's just like when it becomes like your default, it's like, oh,
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to stop, because naturally you just kind of do it just like that without thinking about it subconsciously. But that's why you gotta like be cautious about it and be like, all right, let's not do this.
right. You just got to remember Davis's law, right? I mean, the more you shape your body one way, it's going to get used to being that way.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
if you arms? Like, you know how you cross your arms?
Yeah, same thing, right? That's, you know, rounding your shoulders.
Okay. Yeah, I do that a lot.
I
Yeah,
can't even do
same.
that because of my
Same.
freaking rotator cuff issue that I have. It's not allowing me to have that
Right.
range of motion to stay in that position.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So yeah, so I'm willing to bet that Casey, I'll bet his squat looks like this. We'll see. I'll let you guys know. Or maybe it looks like this, but something is going on and he's just moving in a way that he's really not designed. And so there's just some grinding, and that's what's causing his knee pain. So it's like,
Yeah.
that's great, because it just means that like you've just got like a habit that needs to be fixed. But it just takes time and energy, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So last key piece of information, last really, really important term here, ligaments. So ligaments are the connective tissue that's holding everything together, right? Now, I have a love-hate relationship with this picture right here, because you can see there's actually some pictures of tendons as well, and they do look really similar. Whenever we draw these in medical textbooks and stuff, tendons and ligaments are both drawn in white. But there is a difference, and you want to make sure you keep them straight in your head. Ligaments attach bones to other bones. Okay, so like this bone here, your femur, is being attached to the fibula here, right? That's a ligament.
Oh, okay. I see the difference.
Tendons attach
To the
muscle
muscle. Yeah.
bones. Yeah.
It-
So
Can you show me that one more time? I was writing.
yeah, you're good. So see right here, this bone, this is the femur, and then this is the fibula, right? So this ligament, this is attaching this to this. That's a ligament. And then over
Okay.
here, see this muscle, how it becomes white and then grabs the bone. That's a tendon.
Okay.
They're really similar. They
So
look similar.
the tendon is like, it's actually like a muscle turning into a tendon, no?
Exactly. Muscles,
Okay.
yep. Muscles become tendons and then they grab the bone.
Okay.
Ligaments are bone
ligaments.
to bone.
Okay.
So if we look at like the hand, right? Some let's go meta. Let's pull it up. There we go. All right, so see all this like white connective tissue? Those are all the various ligaments of the hand, right? There's tons of them.
Yeah.
They're all just like, it's like a webbing in this case that's holding it all together. But like, that's what ligaments do. Your ligaments attach bones to bones, okay? So that's the soft connective tissue. Now, the reason that they look so similar to tendons is because when we're drawing things in textbooks, we want to like give you sort of we want to draw it in the most extreme sort of simplified version possible. So it's drawn to be white to indicate that this is something that does not get a lot of blood flow. So
the ligament.
Yeah, the ligaments and the tendons. That's why they're both white. Both tendons and ligaments, they just don't get very much blood flow. They don't have very many blood vessels that are in them. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that they don't get nutrients delivered very often, which means they repair very slowly. Whenever you hear about somebody pulling a muscle, it's honestly usually the tendon's fault. The tendon didn't repair fast enough, so then it can't relax, which means that it just tenses up and it holds, and then the muscle has to like be more flexible than it was supposed to, and it tears, right? Or when you hear about like tendinitis, or you'll hear about like a sprain, and a sprain is a torn ligament. So that's sort of the difference between like a torn muscle and a sprain. A sprain is ligament, which is bone to bone, and a torn muscle is tendon to bone. They are very similar, but you will only find ligaments in synovial joints. You're not going to find ligaments in cartilaginous or fibrous joints, because cartilaginous joints have cartilage holding them together. Fibrous joints, they're just kind of fused together. But ligaments, they repair very slowly, right? They connect bone to bone. They provide us with plenty of stability. They have proprioception. They have joint receptors within them that are telling our body, working with the nervous system to tell us what's going on with our joints. That's why, when you roll your ankle, it feels like you sprained it, or hopefully you didn't actually sprain it, but you kind of overstretch that ligament. It kind of hurts a little bit. Again, they are characterized by poor vascularity. They don't get very much blood flow. And so because of that, they repair very slowly, which is why we need to have like rest days in our workout programs. Honestly, guys, your muscles actually repair pretty quickly, but the tendons don't, and the ligaments don't. So when you have when you're working out like crazy and just like, God, my joints hurt, that's why you just need to, that's why we need to revisit the types of things that, and this is something we're going to talk about, like the Thomases here, they've been through our program design classes. You guys are going to go through program design in a couple weeks. But one of the things that we talk about is cycling our clients through different types of training. One of those types of training is going through what we call the stabilization phase, which is where we do very high repetition exercise for very low weight. And we do very unstable versions of exercise at a super slow tempo. So instead of doing like a heavy like barbell curl or like a super heavy like preacher curl or something, we would instead do like a dumbbell single leg curl, and we would move at a tempo like this. We'd go up and then we'd really slowly take it down.
A lot of core engagement.
Yeah, right. And by moving really slow like this, by doing a high number of repetitions, and by having a really long time under tension, that's stabilization. What it does is that drives blood into our joints, which gives them time to repair. And it fixes, it gives our connective tissue time to catch up to our muscular tissue,
So that, if I want to write that down, I'll be like standing on one leg.
Yep. So that's called a single leg biceps curl.
Okay. And then high rep, low weight, and like slow negative, right? And
slow negative. Yep. Perfect. Well, don't get me wrong. I'm gonna teach you how to do all that in program design. We'll have. I mean, that's honestly the number one thing we spend our time on, actually. But yeah, that's how we want to cycle through. Like I'm doing a powerlifting routine this month, right? Lifted super, super, super heavy. I'm trying to be explosive when I'm doing it. I'm not going slow. I'm going fast, heavy, and lots of rest, super high weight, right? But next month, I'm going to go back to slow, and that'll give my joints time to catch up to my muscles.
I barely do that with my workouts, man. Usually what I do is like, I don't know, I used to go to the gym, do like heavy deadlifts, right? Mm-hmm. And then I'll do like some other stuff at like a medium weight, like bodybuilding kind of.
Yeah. Yep.
And then I'll come home and then I'll like do like, I'll hit the bag, I'll kickbox,
mm-hmm.
I'll swing the sport around like,
sure. Yeah.
So I don't know. I know like you're supposed to do like, I guess, like 1 month of heavy and then another month of, something else.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
I work out bodybuilding and then like kind of fluid motion at the end.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm going to go back to like medium heavy for the next couple months, but in like, because we're getting to the end of the year, right? And so I'll go medium heavy for the next couple months, but then in January, that's where I will do, like I do stabilization pretty much twice a year. I like to do it in January and I like to do it in July. So like, that's enough. That's, I feel like, enough for me to kind of cycle. Other clients, they need a little bit more than that. Some people maybe they even need less. I don't know. That's about as low as I would go. I think you should revisit stabilization at least twice a year.
Yeah.
Some people more often, it just depends on like how, well you're moving and, taking care of yourself and stuff.
Yeah.
So Weight bearing exercise. This is the last thing we'll talk about. We do know that, like, obviously I mentioned at the very beginning of our lesson today, we know that lifting weights is going to have a positive effect on our bone mass, right? The same way that like lifting weights has a positive effect on our muscle mass because we damage our muscles, our immune system repairs those muscles and makes it a little bit bigger. Same thing is true of our bones, right? Well, in particular, the type of exercise that's going to be very good for this is any weight bearing exercise. These are exercises that force us to work against gravity as a resistance. Now, I love resistance bands. I think they're great. I love swimming. I think it's awesome. I love biking. I think that's also really good. But resistance bands, swimming, cycling, those kind of things, they're not working against gravity. They're working against like friction. You know, like a band is like friction, you know, it's like elasticity, or like water, it's like viscosity, right? Cycling is like the friction of a pedal. Those are great. They're a great way to burn calories. They're a great way to build strength. But for some reason, they don't have as positive of an effect on our bones as gravity does. There's something special about gravity. Lifting weights, going for a run, body weight exercises, anything that's using gravity as a resistance for some reason has just been associated with like more bone density. So if you've got somebody with osteoporosis, can you do resistance bands? Yeah, but I'd probably try to get them to lift dumbbells in particular. This is actually, there's a really interesting video that I'll show you guys in later classes when we're talking about bones. And it has a really cool story in the beginning where it talks about these two astronauts who spent a year in space, which is a crazy long amount of time.
Oh, weren't they twins or no?
No, one of them has a twin.
Yeah.
And he's a U.S. senator.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then the other one is he ran for Senate or he's a congressman, something. One of them, or no, one of them's like a state representative, and another one's a senator.
Okay, all right.
He was an astronaut, became a senator. But yeah, if they ever both become senators, they'd be the first twins ever.
Oh, that's crazy.
Senate, yeah. But so that was Scott Kelly. And so anyway, he what they did is they tested his bone density. There's something unique about being in space. I mean, they have astronauts use resistance bands and they work out an hour every day.
Their density his density got less, huh?
And his bone density decreased. And for some reason, so we usually see about 1 to 2% bone loss per year. I'm sorry, per decade, until like we get way older, and then it's like per year. But for some reason in space, it was like 1 to 2% per month.
Oh, bro, because he's weightless, man. There's nothing pushing down on him. Every single direction he moves, it's easy, you know.
He's not tearing his bones.
No gravity. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of fascinating. It's kind of a cool. We'll talk about it. I'll show you the video.
So wait, you said 1 to 2% per decade when we're younger.
Yeah, it's like really low when we're young, and then it speeds up about 1 to 2% per year as we get older. You know, and that's why I see like 10% bone loss per decade, essentially.
Okay, 10%. Okay.
After like 60.
After 60.
So again, these are actually going to be kind of the same pages, but 63 to 86 in the trail guide for some cool pictures. 33 through 39. These are the pages I actually want you to read. 33 through 39 is going to have some really good info on basically all the bones we talked about. That's going to be chapter 2. So really, this is just going to pick up right where you left off yesterday. After reading the nervous system stuff, you're just going to go straight into the bones, and then we'll get into muscles tomorrow.
All right.
33.
Oh, shoot. Sorry. Hold on. Let me get that again.
Yep, I got it.
33, 39.
Yep.
Yeah, and 63 through 86.
So.
All right. Perfect.
But yeah, that's pretty much it. You guys got any questions today? How's everybody feeling?
Okay.
Pretty good.
How about you?
Love it.
Yeah.
All good.
Love it.
About the canvas,
Oh, that's right. Actually, I did want
I might need help. Like, okay, well, if you show us now, that's
yeah. All right, so I'll let anybody out of here. If you guys, if you've already got your Canvas all signed up, we do have homework number 1 today. So I want to walk Eddie and Mir. I want to walk you guys through how to do this real quick.
Okay.
But Thomas and Thomas, you guys are good to go if you don't have any questions.
All right, you guys have a good one.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Bye,
Appreciate
Thomas.
it too.
You too. Yeah. Thanks, Brad. See you guys later.
Yep. See you later.
What was that picture, dog?
Right. Yep. Okay. So Eddie and Mir, did you guys get signed up for Canvas?
No.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mir, let's get you signed up real quick.
Need a Canvas account free.
So I'm actually going to do this for you, if you don't mind.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can actually do this real quick. Okay. What do you want your username to be? Or actually, sorry, what email are you going to use?
Baby. MELOKS. Let's see.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that looks right. Yeah, at Gmail.
Yeah, I'm going to use that for your username as well. And then what do you want your password to be?
Just a capital A. And then like all the way through L. Like AS, you know.
Oh,
Yeah. Let me see.
okay.
Yeah, A through L and then just a 1.
The number 1,
Yeah.
capital A. Cool. 1. And that's going G and H as well, right? Not just the ones that your fingers are on.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, like the whole. Yeah.
Cool. All right, so we'll click that. And there you go. So this is what you're gonna be able to see when you first get on Canvas. It'll look like this. You'll notice like mine looks a little bit different. See how it's got these pages here? I've got these hidden until you need them. You can also see actually, there's the last class like that I taught before you guys came in, and there's the one before that, and the one before that. They're all up here. I hide, and there's at the end here, this is the one you guys are gonna go into after this course. But I hide the days just that way, you know, the one on top, and then tomorrow it'll be day 3, you know, like that way you kind of know what pace we're going at and stuff.
Yeah.
But if you click this, you'll see here's the video from last time. I will replace this video. I'll be replacing this later today with the lecture that I'm recording right now.
Okay.
And then you can see here is the PowerPoint. So if you click this button here, you can download it.
I have a question about the PowerPoint. So let's say like I don't have the PowerPoint. I mean, I don't have the apps to open that up. Is there any way I could have access to it from you guys or no?
Totally. So you can still, if you go to like Google Slides, that's what it's called. Yeah. So go to Google Slides. This is totally free. You can do it with your Google account. Let's see here. Go to Google Slides. So here it is, right? And these are like it's like their version of like PowerPoint and stuff. You can see like, you know, all these various versions. So if I go, I've downloaded it because I got it off Canvas, right? So there it is where I downloaded it. So then if I click blank presentation here and I go to File, Open, and I'm just going to go to my page here, upload. I just drag this in here. And there it is. I can open it on Google Slides. And it's actually way easier than even that. Like I went through a couple processes there, but if I just go to Google Slides and I just.
Yeah, oh, I see. Okay, I just did that on, what is it called? From yesterday's that I downloaded, because I downloaded the PDF and also downloaded the PowerPoint version 1.
Yep.
So, but either way, I could use either both, right? Like that's
Yeah.
just like in case if like I don't have access to like the PowerPoints or whatever, or even use
Yeah.
this. But this is still cool to know. I didn't know this was free.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great. And then you know, like that's why like I told you we're gonna build resumes,
Mhm.
right? I will build them on Google if with you guys if you'd like. Like I got a Google version, I got a Word version, I got a bunch of different types.
Right.
So yeah, so that's the PowerPoint. You get the notes here, right? Same notes that I used again in class. And then you will see there's a third thing today. Like if you go to yesterday, that's all there is, right? If I go to the previous page here, this is day one, just a PowerPoint and the notes, right? Day two, you'll see right here where it has the homework. So this is a hard copy of the homework, just in case you guys want to have this, you know, just in case you want to have this to, you know, have and study for yourself. There it is. You can see it's 15 questions, the multiple choice, right? Little answer key at the bottom. And it shows you it's like, you know, homework one's coming from PowerPoints 1 and 2. It's from yesterday's lesson and today's lesson, right? So then you can click right here. See where it says click here to take homework 1? That's what I want you guys to click today. And then me, I'm on your account, so I'm not going to take this.
Okay.
But click take the quiz, right? Let me go back to my account here.
He's gonna get you a good score. You don't have to take
Yeah,
it.
Right? So, and it'll look like this. You can do this on your phone, you can do this on the computer, but it's like human movement is, I'll give you the first one here. Human movement is accomplished through what? It's asking what the kinetic chain is. That's the muscular, nervous, and skeletal system, not the, you know, skeletal, nervous, and circulatory. It's like, nope, not that one. It's the
muscular nervous system, yeah.
And then I'll do some bad answers here just to get through this real quick. So now what I'll do is I'll hit submit here. And if I look, it's like, there you go. I got it correct, right? It lets me know that I got it right. And then here's the one. It's like, I got it wrong. I put this. The correct answer was this. And so you can see, you know, which ones I got right. Now, it'll log my score as 3 out of 15. Okay. So that's 3 out of 15. I got 20% right. So if I take this again, and I get 100, because maybe I write all the answers down, right? Well, then I'm averaging 20 plus 100 divided by 2. So now I'm averaging 60%. So that's not quite passing just yet. So maybe that's not what you want on your grade book. So take it again and get another 100. 60 plus 100 divided by 2. Now I've got an average of 80%. So now I'm getting a B. So again, you're going to get better scores the more often you do it. And kind of practice there, and it'll log all your grades and stuff. You'll be able to check your.
Is it always the same questions? No, right?
It'll be the same questions. Yep, every time.
So yeah, I figured out how to get to where it says day 1, day 2.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want you guys to do, just honestly, just go to home every time and just, you know, that there's homework on day 2 every day, right?
Yeah. That's the dashboard.
Go to assignments. Which actually, hold on a second. Assignments. Yeah. You could go to assignments and you can find it from there. But I think it's a little bit harder to navigate personally. Like if you go, because if you go to assignments, you'll see it's like all the up, and it's just like in one big list here. And you got to like hunt around and find the right one. Or if you go to quizzes, like you'll see that's the same thing. You can get them there, but I don't recommend it. Honestly, like it's so much easier to just, because then it's just jumbled.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, it's so much easier. Just go here, click on day 2, and then click here to take homework 1. So.
Okay, if I click the homework one right now and then go back a page, is it gonna count?
Oh, yeah. It'll log your progress. Yeah.
Okay,
you can even like do half of it now and then like be like, oh crap, I forgot, I gotta go walk the dog or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can come back to it and finish later.
Okay.
When are like when is homework due? Like let's say like when are you gonna like when's the deadline basically for like the
Oh.
day you leave us homework?
So here's the thing. I gotta go I gotta post grades every now and then.
Yeah.
But the way I always think about it is like, again, you guys are adults. If like I expect that you guys probably work, you gotta pay bills. If you can't get it every day that it's like like I assigned it today. So some people
By
say
or
it's due by midnight tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do stuff like that. But basically, like just try to like by the weekend, always you'll only ever have up to 2 assignments.
yeah.
That's the maximum I ever give per week. Occasionally 3 if there's like a test on that day. You know what I mean? But you'll never have more than 3, and you get the whole weekend to do it. That's my advice, but I'm not gonna check it and like, be like, hey, you didn't get it in by Monday, and then like it's, you're not gonna get to do it. You'll always get a chance to do it, but I definitely recommend not getting behind.
Yeah.
Like, Sochi does not slow down for anybody. It just
Right.
keeps rolling. It's all a wheel. It's all rolling downhill, and there's no stopping it. Like
Right. And
so
how
I've
would
had
you
people
know?
be like, oh, I'll get it in. And then all of a sudden they've got 6 pieces of homework to do. And I'm like, look, I got to go post grades. Like, you got to get these in, like,
Yeah.
so.
So then we'll have time for the weekend if we wanted to. Worst case scenario, we're just super busy that week for whatever reason, stuff like that. I mean, I just want to make sure just in case of like there's a situation like that where it's like, oh man, I got a lot of stuff to do,
No,
whatever.
totally. No, like Thomas is really behind it. Like he had a crazy week. He was telling me about he's got some stuff going on.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I get, he's like, hey, you're going to see I'm a couple homeworks behind. And I was like, all right, well, you're aware of it. Your deadline is, and, I gave him, it's not a deadline that like, I'm no longer going to accept them. I just told him, I was like, look, personal goal in the same way that I give my client like a deadline to try to hit a weight loss goal. Let's see if we can get it in by, and I, gave him till the end of the month,
Okay.
so.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna, like I said, so we'll have like basically like a full week of just like getting it done for each assignment that you leave us, right? You said like up to like no more than 3 or something like that a week, so.
Yeah, I recommend just like, try not to get too far, try not to get a week or 2 behind,
Yeah.
No, definitely not, definitely not.
Because here's the other thing too. We're gonna meet up next week on Tuesday, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And remember, half of those things are from the homeworks. So like, don't try to like get to a place where you need to do the test before you have done the homework.
Yeah.
Like,
You're not know half of the stuff, right?
yeah, exactly. It's like you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot,
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, sounds good, man.
All right, guys. Hey, good work.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, let me kill the recording.